I returned to the office after 3 grueling days in Chicago, where I'd closed the largest deal of my career. My client had signed on for a 5-year contract, worth enough to secure our division's budget for the next 2 fiscal years. The flight home had been sleepless, but I walked into the building lighter than I'd felt in months. This was supposed to be a victory lap. But the moment I stepped out of the elevator, I knew something was wrong. The energy of our floor, the constant hum of collaboration, the low buzz of chatter, the tapping of keyboards, was gone. The wide-open space where my team had worked for years was unnervingly silent. Even the overhead lights seemed dimmer. "Carla," I called out, looking for my project manager, who usually beat everyone else in. No answer. My heels echoed too loudly against the polished floors as I moved deeper into the East Wing. That's when I noticed it. The desks were empty. Not just cleared of papers, but stripped bare. Monitors gone, chairs missing. Even the corkboard covered with our inside jokes and late-night pizza receipts had been taken down. Only pale dust outlines remained where our equipment once stood. I froze. The office we had earned, the bright, airy corner space awarded after 3 consecutive quarters of over-delivery, was gone. A voice broke my shock. "Amanda." I turned to see Marcus from HR, holding a stack of folders. His expression was tight, almost apologetic. "Where's my team?" I asked, my voice sharper than intended. He hesitated, shifting the folders from one hand to the other. "You should check the basement." "The basement?" My chest tightened. That wasn't office space. It was storage, maintenance, the place interns joked about when they lost Wi-Fi connection. Still, I forced my feet forward. The elevator ride down felt longer than my entire flight from Chicago. Each floor passed with a metallic groan, the sense of dread pressing harder against my ribs. When the doors opened, the air changed immediately. Stale, damp, with the faint smell of mildew. I followed extension cords that snaked along the floor, past stacks of old chairs and broken printers, until I found a door with a crooked piece of paper taped to it. In bold black marker, Marketing Team B, my team. I pushed the door open. They were there, huddled together under low pipes and fluorescent lights that flickered like they were apologizing for existing. Their monitors balanced precariously on folding tables, cables tangled like jungle vines. A bucket caught water dripping from the ceiling, landing with hollow plunks beside Carla's desk. The faces that looked up at me weren't just tired. They were humiliated. "What happened?" I whispered, though I already knew. Carla's voice cracked as she spoke. "While you were gone, John came down with movers, said we had 30 minutes to relocate, for his new hire." A bitter laugh slipped from Eric, our copywriter. "The golden boy. Some kid fresh out of a boutique agency. Apparently he's going to revolutionize the department." My jaw clenched. John, our new department head. Barely 6 months in, desperate to impress the executives. And apparently willing to sacrifice the people who carried this company through late nights and impossible deadlines just to prop up a single flashy hire. I glanced at the faces around me. Carla, who had turned down higher-paying offers just to stay with this team. Eric, who had stayed up 3 nights straight rewriting a campaign that ended up saving a $1 million client. May, whose designs had become the backbone of our brand identity. Years of loyalty, years of results. And this was their reward? I took a deep breath. "Pack your bags," I said. Confusion flickered across their faces. "Not just for down here," I clarified. "For good. Quietly, without raising suspicion. Gather your work, your files, anything you want to keep, and don't mention this conversation to anyone else." Silence filled the basement. A silence so heavy I could feel it pressing against my skin. Then, slowly, Carla nodded. May reached for her notebook. Eric pushed his glasses up the bridge of his nose, his hands trembling. They didn't fully understand yet. But they trusted me. And John had no idea what was coming. By the time I climbed back upstairs, my pulse had steadied, but the anger hadn't left. I walked straight toward our old office, the space that had once felt like home. Through the glass walls, I saw him. The golden boy. He couldn't have been more than 26. Clean suit, hair styled like he'd walked straight out of a magazine spread. He was arranging framed certificates across the desk that had been mine, setting them down with a careful pride. His laptop gleamed, brand new. His chair, the one I'd personally picked for ergonomic support during our late nights, now rolled under his hand. And standing beside him was John, our department head. "Ah, Amanda," he said when he noticed me. His voice carried too much brightness, the kind used to mask guilt. "Back from Chicago already. Come in, come in." I didn't move. I stayed in the doorway, arms crossed. "This is Adrian," John continued, gesturing toward the young man. "Our new innovation strategist. He's here to help transform the department. Fresh ideas, bold perspectives, the kind of disruption we need." Adrian offered me a polite smile, but didn't stop arranging his certificates. Harvard, Yale, an internship with some boutique firm in New York. The type of shiny accolades executives adored. I said nothing. John lowered his voice as though confiding a secret. "We've moved your team temporarily. Basement space is all we had available until the next budget cycle. They'll be fine. It's only a few months. Meanwhile, Adrian will be leading our next big campaign. You'll support him, of course." The words hit like a slap. Support him? After everything my team had delivered? After the deal I'd just closed that secured the very budget John was pretending didn't exist? I kept my tone even. "You put my team in a basement with leaking pipes so one person could sit here?" John's smile tightened. "Amanda, I know it's not ideal, but this is the direction the company's moving in. Results are good, but optics matter. Adrian knows how to speak the language executives want to hear. You've always been reliable, but we need someone who can shine." There it was. Reliable. The word they use when they want to dismiss you politely. Not brilliant. Not essential. Just reliable. I felt something settle inside me then. A quiet clarity. "I see," I said softly. John mistook my calm for acceptance. He smiled wider. "Excellent. I knew you'd understand. Now, why don't you give Adrian access to the files from Chicago? He'll need them for the presentation next week." For a moment, I almost laughed. The deal I'd just closed, my deal, was being handed to someone who hadn't even been in the building when the first pitch was made. But I didn't argue. Not yet. Instead, I turned, walked out, and headed back to the basement. When I opened the door, the room fell silent. My team's eyes darted to mine, searching for answers. Carla spoke first. "Well?" I looked at them. The 7 people who had given years of loyalty, who had pulled all-nighters, who had sacrificed weekends and birthdays for impossible deadlines. And now, shoved underground so a stranger could play hero. I forced a smile, though my chest was burning. He's exactly what you imagined. Young, shiny, full of buzzwords. John is convinced he's the future. Eric swore under his breath. May's eyes welled with tears she quickly wiped away. "But here's the thing," I continued. "He doesn't know what we know. He doesn't have our history, our skills, or our trust. And John? He's too blinded to see it. That's fine. Let them underestimate us." Carla frowned. "Amanda, what are you saying?" "I'm saying," I replied, lowering my voice, "that we're not going to fight this in the open. Not yet. We're going to keep working, keep documenting, keep doing everything with excellence. But at the same time, we prepare. Quietly. For ourselves, not for them." The room stayed silent, the hum of the fluorescent light buzzing like a warning. Finally, Vega, the oldest of us, spoke. "You mean, leave?" "Eventually," I said. "But not in pieces, not resignations that trickle away unnoticed. Together, when the time is right." They exchanged glances. Some looked hopeful, others scared. Ren, the youngest, leaned forward. "But where would we even go? Who would take all of us?" I thought of my contacts. The clients I'd nurtured over the years, the network I'd built quietly while John played politics. A dozen possibilities flashed through my mind. That, I said slowly, is what I'll figure out. In the meantime, we work. We deliver. But everything we do, every draft, every design, every report, we keep copies. Our work belongs to us, not to someone who sees us as furniture to be shuffled around. Carla's lips curved into the faintest smile. Vega nodded once, solemn. Eric straightened his posture as though remembering who he was. I looked around the room, feeling the fire spread from me to them. Trust me, I whispered. This isn't the end. It's the beginning. For the first time that day, hope replaced humiliation in their eyes. John thought he'd buried us in a basement. He had no idea he'd just given us the perfect place to plan. For the next 2 weeks, life in the basement became our new reality. The air smelled faintly of mildew. The flickering fluorescent light gave half the team headaches. And every time the plumbing groaned above us, I felt the insult all over again. But my team showed up every day, still producing excellent work, still meeting deadlines, still loyal. It wasn't lost on me how much strength it took. I kept my promise to them. We worked as though nothing had changed. But quietly behind the scenes, I prepared. Every file we produced, every report, every campaign draft, we archived. Not just in the company system, but privately, in organized folders only we controlled. I instructed each team member to back up their contributions, to track revisions, to keep detailed notes. Why? Darius, our analyst, asked one afternoon. They don't care about our work anymore. Because we do, I told him, and because one day someone else will. The truth was, I'd already started reaching out. A call here, a message there. Former colleagues, old clients, people I hadn't spoken to in years. I didn't pitch anything yet. I was planting seeds, reconnecting, testing the ground. And while I worked quietly, upstairs, cracks began to appear in John's masterpiece. The first came during Adrian's innovation presentation. He stood in front of a dozen executives delivering slides full of buzzwords. Disruption, synergy, paradigm shift. He had polished graphs, colorful visuals, and a smile that never wavered. But when the questions started, real questions, his facade slipped. How does this scale with our current client portfolio? One executive asked. Adrian blinked. Well, that's something I'm still modeling. What about integration with existing campaigns? Another pressed. Adrian stammered. That will, depend on adoption rates. I heard about it later from a colleague who slipped into the basement to warn me. The kid froze, she whispered, glancing around as though sharing state secrets. John had to jump in and spin it. Executives didn't look impressed. I smiled quietly. Not because I enjoyed watching Adrian fail, but because the truth always finds its way out. Flash fades fast under pressure. The second crack came a week later. Adrian had been handed oversight of the campaign I'd secured in Chicago. My deal. My client. He was supposed to prepare the launch plan. Instead, he dumped half-finished drafts on my team. Just polish this up for me, he told Carla, as though she were an assistant. Carla, professional as always, nodded. But when she showed me the files, I nearly laughed. They weren't even coherent. Fluffy slogans, empty catchphrases, zero data. He expects us to fix this? She asked, eyes blazing. Yes, I said calmly. And we will, but we'll also keep the originals. We cleaned his mess, delivered a polished product, and watched as John paraded Adrian upstairs to present it. I heard later how Adrian had smiled proudly as though he'd crafted every line. My team's faces fell when they heard. He's taking credit for our work, May whispered. I know, I told them. And we'll let him. For now. Because each stolen draft, each presentation where Adrian faltered, each panicked email John sent to cover his protégé's mistakes, it was all part of the story that was quietly writing itself. One Friday evening, I stayed late, alone in the basement. The others had gone home, but I needed the silence to think. My phone buzzed with a message from an old client. "Let's catch up next week. I've been hearing interesting things about your company." I stared at the screen for a long moment. The network I'd nurtured for years was still alive. And now, they were watching. That's when I realized something important. John thought burying us in the basement made us invisible, but it had done the opposite. Executives were starting to ask questions. Clients were curious. And every day, Adrian revealed how little substance he had. The humiliation was real, but so was the opportunity. I closed my laptop, the sound echoing in the concrete room, and whispered into the empty air. Not much longer. The next Monday, John himself came down to the basement. He never set foot there unless he had to. He leaned against a folding table, his smile stretched too thin. "Good news," he announced. "We're considering moving you back upstairs. Not to your old space, of course. That's occupied. But the East Wing is being renovated. Might be ready by next quarter." My team exchanged glances. Hope flickered in Ren's eyes. Even Eric sat a little taller. I forced myself to smile. "That's very generous of you, John." He relaxed, mistaking my words for gratitude. But inside, I was already thinking ahead, because I knew something my team didn't. This wasn't generosity. It was desperation. The executives had started to doubt him, and he needed us visible again to cover Adrian's failures. It was too late. My team thought they were waiting for redemption. I knew we were preparing for escape. And John? He had no idea the ground beneath him was already starting to crack. By the time February rolled around, the cracks in John's Golden Boy experiment were becoming impossible to ignore. Adrian had charm, yes, and he could talk circles around buzzwords. But the moment anyone pressed for detail, he floundered. The executives were starting to notice. My team heard it in whispers from colleagues. Does he actually know what he's doing? But John still clung to him like a lifeline. Down in the basement, we carried on, day after day. The dripping pipes, the buzzing lights, the smell of damp cardboard. Those things became part of our routine. What mattered wasn't the conditions. It was the quiet shift happening within my team. They weren't beaten down anymore. They were waiting. Each day, I gave them quiet tasks, archive projects, update documentation, polish transition guides. It looked like we were simply doing due diligence. In reality, we were preparing to walk out with everything organized, ready to hit the ground running somewhere else. One Wednesday, Ren cornered me as we were leaving. "Amanda, I don't get it. Why help them like this? They shoved us down here and we're making transition guides for them?" I put a hand on her shoulder. Because everything we do with integrity. We don't let them decide who we are. And because when the time comes, those guides will prove just how much they relied on us. She didn't look entirely convinced, but she nodded. That same week, I had coffee with an old colleague, Martin, who now worked at a mid-sized firm downtown. I hadn't told my team yet. I wanted to test the waters first. "You still have that crew of miracle workers?" Martin asked, stirring his espresso. "I do," I said carefully, "though we're not exactly being treated like miracle workers these days." Martin leaned in, lowering his voice. "Funny you mentioned that. We're expanding. Big accounts coming in, more than our current staff can handle. We need people who can deliver under pressure. People who don't crack when things get ugly. Sound like anyone you know?" I smiled. "I can't promise anything yet," I said. "But if things don't improve where we are, I might be open to conversations." Martin didn't press, but when I left the cafe, I felt the first flicker of something I hadn't felt in weeks. Freedom. Meanwhile, upstairs, Adrian's failures were becoming John's problem. At a Friday all-hands meeting, Adrian presented his latest strategic overhaul. He clicked through slides of sweeping changes, abandoning traditional client channels, doubling its spend on untested platforms, rebranding campaigns that were already successful. The room was silent when he finished. Finally, one executive asked, And what's the projected ROI on these changes? Adrian opened his mouth, then closed it. His eyes darted to John. John jumped in, talking fast, throwing percentages that didn't add up. I caught the looks exchanged between executives, calculating, skeptical. Later that day, John stormed into the basement, his tie askew. I need the numbers from the Chicago account cleaned and ready by Monday, he snapped. Carla raised an eyebrow. Didn't Adrian already present his projections? John's face flushed. Just do it. We did. We always did. But this time we made sure to keep copies. That weekend, I invited the team to my apartment. Nothing fancy. Pizza boxes stacked on the counter, laptops scattered across the dining table. They looked nervous. It wasn't often I pulled them outside of work. Why are we here? Eric asked, pushing his glasses up. I took a deep breath. Because it's time to be honest with you. I've started talking to people, reaching out to contacts. There are opportunities out there, real ones, for all of us. The room went still. You mean, leave? May whispered. Yes, I said simply. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. Together. Vega leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. After 30 years here, I thought I'd retire at this company. But sitting in that basement, it's clear they don't value us. If you're saying we can walk out of there and land somewhere that does, I'm in. Carla nodded firmly. Wren's eyes lit up with something close to relief. One by one, they agreed. For the first time in weeks, I saw their shoulders lift, the weight of humiliation easing just a little. Good, I said. Then here's the plan. We keep working. We keep smiling. We let them believe they've broken us. Meanwhile, I'll secure our options, and when the time is right, we walk, all at once. They looked at me with a mix of fear and hope. You really think we can pull this off? Wren asked. I met her gaze. I don't think. I know. As they left that night, I stood at the window, looking down at the city lights. Somewhere out there, opportunities were waiting. Somewhere out there, people would actually value what we could do. John thought he'd buried us in a basement. What he didn't realize was that basements aren't just for storage. They're where foundations are built. And we were building ours, brick by brick. By the first week of March, the basement felt less like punishment and more like a staging area. We still hit every deadline. We still documented every step. We still smiled when someone from upstairs came down to check in. But the mood had shifted. People weren't defeated anymore. They were alert. At 7:12 a.m. on Monday, my phone buzzed with an email from Martin. Subject: formal offer, team transition. Body: attaching roles and compensation for your entire team. We can accommodate staggered starts within 2 weeks. Dedicated workspace, equipment of your choosing, and budget approval for 2 hires you've been asking for. I opened the PDF and skimmed. Salary bumps between 22 to 35%. Titles that matched actual responsibilities. A hybrid work policy, and, crucially, a promise in writing. Creative autonomy and veto power on strategy when data didn't support an idea. It was the kind of respect you can't fake. 20 minutes later, a second message landed. From Priya, a former client now VP at a national retailer. Subject: pilot proposal. We want your team on a 6-month retainer. You choose deliverables. If results hit targets, we expand to a multi-year contract. I'll put this in writing if you're in. I stared at the screen long enough for the coffee to go cold. 2 doors, both open. At noon, I brought pizza to the basement, thin crust, everybody's favorite, and handed out printed copies of Martin's offer. I watched their faces as they read. Eric exhaled first, long and shaky. This is real. May pressed a hand to her mouth. Wren blinked fast, like she was trying not to cry. Vega read every word twice, then laid the pages down like a ceremony. Before anyone says yes, I said, we still finish what we started here. We do a clean handoff. No loose ends, no burn bridges. But you should also see this. I held up Priya's email on my phone. an optional retainer. If we take it, we walk in with revenue. Carla nodded slowly. That gives us leverage. Exactly, I said. And protection. We're not running. We're transitioning. On our terms. The door swung open before anyone could reply. John walked in with Marcus from HR on his heel. John's smile stretched too wide. Team meeting, he announced. Good news. He set a thin folder on our folding table like it was a trophy. The East Wing renovation is approved. We'll have space for you. Temporarily at first. Also, effective immediately, I can offer a 15% raise across your team. In return, I need you all aligned behind Adrian's strategy. The company needs unified messaging. Carla's expression didn't move. Vega's jaw did. I kept my voice even. Is the raise in writing? Marcus cleared his throat. We can get letters out by end of week. And the space? I asked. Is it ours, or are we bridging for someone else? John's smile twitched. You'll be upstairs. Optics matter. We need you visible. There it was again. Optics. Not value. Not trust. Optics. We'll review, I said. We'll let you know by tomorrow. John looked surprised I hadn't thanked him. Great, he said too brightly. Let's move forward together. When they left, the door closed on a silence so thick I could taste the metal in it. Ren was the first to speak. 15%? That would have been amazing 3 months ago. It's bait now, Vega muttered. It's data, I said. It tells us they're worried. I didn't say what I was thinking. You don't offer money and a move upstairs unless someone above you is asking hard questions. That night, at 8:43 p.m., I got the proof. An email from the CEO's assistant. Elena would like to meet with you tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. No subject line fluff. No explanation. Just a time. I didn't sleep much. I printed what I needed. A 5-year productivity snapshot with our team's deliverables. A resource allocation timeline showing the day we were moved to the basement. A clean, side-by-side comparison of Adrian's proposals and the actual data behind them. And a neutral, factual transition plan. 2 weeks, complete documentation, available for Q&A integrity in black and white. At 9:27 a.m., I was outside Elena's office. Glass walls, city view, minimalist desk, nothing to hide behind. She stood when I walked in. Amanda, sit. Her tone was level, but her eyes were measuring. I set my folder on the desk and waited. I've heard a dozen different versions of the same rumor, she said. Your team plans to resign together. Is that true? I haven't submitted anything, I said. But I've made sure we're employable. If we leave, we will do it cleanly. She didn't flinch. Why now? The basement? I know it was unacceptable. I signed off on the move because I was told it was temporary and necessary. I slid the first packet across the desk. This is 5 years of deliverables. Ours, by name. 72% of the department's shipped campaigns, 90% on time, 95% within budget. This, I added, tapping the next sheet, is the date we were moved to the basement and the subsequent drop in cross-team response times and QA pass rates. Elena scanned. Quiet. I kept going. This is a neutral review of the Chicago account Adrian is leading. You'll see inconsistencies between his projected ROI and the assumptions he used. Not malicious, just ungrounded. She turned to the last section. And this? A transition plan, I said. If we leave, we'll leave well. 2 weeks, full documentation, 8 hours of scheduled knowledge transfer per functional area. I won't let my team walk out and burn the place down. Elena set the papers down and looked at me for a long beat. Do you want to stay? I didn't answer right away. I want my team respected, I said finally. I want decisions to be driven by data, not optics. And I want authority to say no when a plan doesn't hold water. And John? She asked. That's your call, I said. But my team won't report to someone who put us in a basement to make room for a resume. She smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. I appreciate your clarity. She slid a blank notepad toward me. If I asked you to write the structure you'd say yes to, what would it look like? I wrote 3 lines. Direct reporting to the VP or CEO for 12 months to rebuild trust. Autonomy with accountability. Quarterly targets. Veto power against non-data-backed changes. Facilities, resources, suitable workspace, equipment parity, and hiring approval for 2 additions. I pushed the notepad back. If you can't do that, I understand. We have options. Elena read it, then capped her pen. Give me until tomorrow. When I stepped into the hallway, my phone buzzed again. This time from an unknown number. I answered. Is this Amanda? A man asked. I'm Samir, CFO at the Chicago client. We had a call with Adrian this morning. It didn't go well. He paused, choosing his words. We signed with your company because of you and your team. If you're not leading the account, we'll reevaluate. I hear you, I said. I can't make promises I can't keep. That's fair, he said, but we need a clear answer by Friday. When the line went dead, I stood there with the phone against my palm, the weight of it new. It wasn't just about us anymore. There were consequences outside our building. Back in the basement, I gathered everyone around the folding tables. We have 2 external offers, I said. 1 salaried, team intact. 1 retainer, revenue on day 1. The CEO asked for a day to respond to our terms. The client from Chicago hinted they'll walk if we're not on the account. Carla let out a low whistle. Darius rubbed his temples. May folded her arms tight across her chest. What do you want us to do? Ren asked. Exactly what we've been doing, I said. We document, we deliver, we don't leak. Tonight, check your handover notes again. Tomorrow might move fast. If you're watching this and you've ever been shoved into a metaphorical basement, I'd say to camera if this were already a video. Here's your reminder. Make a plan before you make a scene. But this wasn't a video. Yet. It was the line I kept repeating to myself. At 6:11 p.m., as we packed up, John appeared in the doorway again, alone this time. His voice had lost its bounce. Amanda, he said, let's talk. I can push the raises to 20%. We'll announce your move upstairs tomorrow. I'll put you as co-lead with Adrian. I met his eyes and saw finally what had been missing all along. Fear. I'll let you know tomorrow, I said. When he left, Eric muttered, Co-lead is code for babysitting. Co-lead is code for optics, I said, and tomorrow isn't about optics. I turned off the flickering lights, and for a second the room fell completely dark before the emergency strips glowed. In that breath of darkness, the plan felt solid, like stepping onto something that wouldn't give way. The next morning, I arrived earlier than usual. The basement was still and quiet, only the hum of the fluorescent lights keeping me company. I laid out the final versions of our documentation packets on the folding table. Transition guides, project overviews, client histories, all meticulously prepared. One by one, my team filtered in. Carla set her coffee down and glanced at the papers. Feels like we're packing for a trip, she said softly. In a way we are, I replied. We just don't know which destination yet. At 9:15 a.m., I received a text from Elena's assistant. Board meeting moved up. Please come with your team. 9:30 sharp. I looked up. 7 pairs of eyes were locked on me. This is it, I said. The boardroom felt like another world compared to the basement. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows. The mahogany table gleamed. The board members, 10 of them, sat in their tailored suits, eyes sharp, expressions unreadable. Elena sat at the head, calm as always. To her left sat John. His tie was perfect, but his face was drawn, pale. Adrian was there too, shifting nervously in his chair, the confidence drained from his posture. Thank you for joining us, Elena began. We're here to discuss the restructuring plan for marketing, including concerns raised about team allocation. John stood, smoothing his jacket. As you know, he began, our department is undergoing a transformation. Adrian has been pivotal in spearheading this effort. His strategies will position us as leaders in innovation. The temporary relocation of Team B was necessary to optimize resources. Moving forward, I propose... Stop. The voice came from one of the senior board members, a silver-haired woman I'd only met twice. Temporary relocation? You put your highest producing team in a basement with no ventilation, no light, and leaking pipes. Did you think we wouldn't find out? John stammered. It was logistical. We had no choice. Elena turned to me. Amanda, would you share your perspective? I rose, my knees steady despite the weight of the room. With respect, this isn't about space. It's about priorities. We've delivered 70% of this department's campaigns over the last 5 years. We've exceeded deadlines, hit budget targets, and closed the largest deal in Q1 history. And yet, my team was pushed into a basement to make room for someone with buzzwords, but no results. I slid copies of our documentation down the table. This is our work. This is Adrian's. Compare the numbers. For a moment, the only sound was the shuffle of papers. Then one board member muttered, "This is damning." Another added, "The client feedback is clear. They trust Amanda's team, not Adrian." I kept my voice level. We aren't here to argue for scraps of recognition. We came prepared to leave. We have offers. Good ones. But Elena asked for a chance to respond. So here we are. Elena nodded, then addressed the board. You've seen the data. You've seen the results. My proposal is simple. Amanda's team reports directly to me. They receive the resources and authority they've earned. John remains in a reduced oversight role for administrative purposes. Adrian will be reassigned pending performance review. John's face drained of color. Adrian stared at the table. One board member leaned back, steepling his fingers. Amanda, is this acceptable to you? I met his gaze. It's acceptable only if my team agrees. I turned to them. Carla, steady as ever, gave a sharp nod. May's lips curved in a small smile. Vega muttered, "About time." The others followed. I faced the board again. Then yes. When the meeting ended, John tried to corner me in the hallway. You set me up, he hissed. You wanted this from the start. I held his gaze. Number you set yourself up when you put us in that basement. I just made sure the right people saw it. His mouth opened, then closed. For the first time since he arrived, he had nothing to say. Back in the basement, I told my team. The cheer that went up echoed off the concrete walls, a sound halfway between laughter and relief. Ren actually cried. Eric fist-bumped Vega, who looked as though a weight he'd carried for decades had finally been lifted. We're not done, I reminded them, smiling despite myself. We've still got to move back upstairs, this time for good. Carla raised her coffee cup like a toast. To daylight, she said. To daylight, we echoed. 2 weeks later, we sat in our new space. Bright windows, modern desks, plants back on the shelves. Adrian's desk was empty, his certificates gone. John's office door was closed more often than not. He'd been stripped of real authority, his power reduced to managing paperwork. We didn't celebrate his fall. That wasn't the point. The point was us. We had weathered humiliation, we had carried each other through, and we had walked out stronger. That evening, as the sun dipped low across the city skyline, I sent a message to my team. Remember this, the best revenge isn't destroying those who wrong you. It's building something they can never take away from you again. And for the first time in months, I felt at peace. Because we were no longer the team in the basement. We were the team that survived it, and built our own way back into the light. I had just returned from my 15-minute coffee break when I noticed something strange. 2 people in dark suits were standing at my cubicle. Both wore ID badges clipped neatly to their belts, and each carried a slim folder. One of them was wearing latex gloves, flipping through my drawers as if I were some sort of criminal. The other was photographing my computer screen, moving slowly, methodically. My heart didn't race. It just dropped into my stomach. I knew instantly what this was. I walked closer, clutching my coffee cup, trying to keep my face neutral. "Is there a problem?" I asked. The taller officer straightened. "Jessica Alvarez?" I nodded. "We're conducting a compliance inspection," he said, in that rehearsed tone people use when they've said the same line 100 times before. "Based on an anonymous report." Anonymous. Sure. I didn't need anyone to tell me who had filed that report. Just 2 cubicles away, pretending to be buried in spreadsheets, was Chloe Sanders, my boss's only daughter. The same Chloe who'd started at the company 3 months ago. The same Chloe who made it painfully obvious that she thought my position should have been hers. I looked back at the officers and forced a calm smile. "Go ahead," I said, setting my coffee down. "You won't find anything." But even as I said it, my hands trembled slightly. Not because I was guilty, because I knew exactly how far Chloe had been willing to go. Chloe and I had never gotten along. From her very first day, she treated the office like it was her kingdom, and the rest of us were peasants. She interrupted meetings to clarify points I'd already explained, usually getting them wrong. She would drop her father's name casually, reminding everyone who really held the power. And me? I was the person standing between her and a promotion she believed she deserved. I'd been here for 6 years. I knew the clients, the regulations, the systems. My work wasn't flashy, but it was solid. Which is exactly why she hated me. Because you can't outshine someone who doesn't need to shine in the first place. The officers kept working in silence. They opened file folders, flipped through reports, checked my desktop. Every now and then, they exchanged glances. That wordless kind of communication that makes everyone around them nervous. I crossed my arms and stayed quiet. Inside, though, my thoughts were racing. This is it. She's finally done it. Chloe's managed to convince them I'm a liability. Months of whispers, fake concern, accidental mistakes pinned on me. She's been building this moment. I stole a glance in her direction. She was pretending to highlight cells on a spreadsheet, but her eyes kept flicking up, watching. She wasn't even trying to hide it. I should have been angry. I should have felt humiliated, standing there while strangers rifled through my things. But instead, I felt something different. A strange kind of calm. Because Chloe had no idea what she was about to walk into. Before I tell you what happened next, could you take a quick second to drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from? I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you haven't already, please subscribe and hit the bell, because this story only gets wilder from here. The shorter officer pulled open my bottom drawer. He sifted past notebooks, pens, and a few personal items. Then his gloved hand froze. He pulled out a leather-bound folder, flipped it open, and frowned. "Jessica," he said slowly. "What's this?" I glanced down at the file in his hands. My chest tightened. It wasn't mine. At least, it hadn't been yesterday. Inside were printed emails, notes scribbled in handwriting that wasn't mine, even screenshots of supposed mistakes. Mistakes that looked suspiciously like the ones Chloe had whispered about in the past weeks. I felt my throat go dry, but I forced myself to breathe evenly. "That's not my file," I said. The taller officer's eyebrows lifted. "It was in your drawer." I looked straight at him. "And yet it doesn't belong to me." Behind me, I heard the faintest sound, the squeak of Chloe's chair as she shifted, trying to see. For a moment, the break room chatter, the ringing phones, the tapping keyboards around me all seemed to fade. It was just me, the officers, and the folder that could ruin my career. But then something happened that shifted everything. The officer kept flipping through the pages, his expression darkening. He showed a page to his partner. They whispered quickly, then glanced at me with an unreadable look. "Miss Alvarez," the shorter one said finally, "we need to speak with you in private." I nodded, steady as stone. Of course. Because if they looked closely enough, they'd see the truth. And when they did, Chloe's plan would collapse before her eyes. The compliance officers led me down the hall to one of the small, glass-walled conference rooms. My coworkers' eyes followed me as we walked past, whispering behind hands, pretending to look busy. I could practically hear the story spreading. Jessica's under investigation. Compliance caught her red-handed. Inside the room, they closed the blinds, sat across from me, and placed the folder on the table like it was evidence in a trial. The taller officer cleared his throat. Jessica, as part of this inspection, we're obligated to review any documents found at your workstation. Can you explain the origin of this file? I leaned back in my chair, forcing myself to stay calm. I've never seen that folder before today. He raised an eyebrow. It was found in your desk drawer. I believe you, I said evenly, but that doesn't make it mine. The shorter officer flipped open the folder. These appear to be records of errors, policy violations, and misconduct. The notes are dated, signed with initials, and include supporting documents. For example, he pulled out a page. An email to a client where you allegedly provided incorrect policy terms. I felt my stomach tighten. I remembered that email. Except, I had caught the mistake before it went out. I'd rewritten it and resent it within 10 minutes. The incorrect version had never left my drafts. I looked the officer straight in the eye. That's not the final email. That's a screenshot of an unsent draft. The two men exchanged a look. For weeks, I'd sensed Chloe circling. The accidental bumps into my desk when she passed by. The casual remarks she made about my bad memory in meetings. The way she'd hover whenever I was typing, like she was waiting for me to slip. And now, here it was. Her big move. A fabricated dossier of my supposed incompetence. Except Chloe had made one mistake. She thought I didn't know how closely she'd been watching me. But I had been watching her too. The officers asked me to walk them through the documents, page by page. There were screenshots of spreadsheets with errors circled in red. But the version in the folder wasn't the final version. The corrected file was still sitting on the company's shared drive with my digital signature and timestamp. There were printouts of emails with typos or wrong dates, but every one of those had a follow-up correction, also time-stamped, also logged. And then there were handwritten notes, pages and pages of them. They described me as habitually late, unprofessional in tone, and potentially reckless with client data. The handwriting was neat, feminine, loopy, like a teenager's journal. Not mine. I pointed to the notes. Do you have handwriting samples on file? The taller officer gave me a measured look. Why? Because anyone who's worked here longer than a week knows I print in block capitals. Always. It's in my HR file. That's not my writing. He scribbled a note to himself. After nearly an hour, they leaned back in their chairs. The shorter officer tapped the folder. Jessica, do you have any idea who might want to create this kind of documentation about you? I hesitated, just long enough to make it look like I was reluctant. Then I sighed. I don't want to make accusations without proof, but Chloe Sanders has expressed interest in my position. She also has access to my desk. Everyone does. The drawers don't lock. They didn't respond right away, but I could tell by the way they exchanged glances that the name wasn't unfamiliar. Back at my cubicle, Chloe was waiting. She wasn't looking at me directly, but I could feel the smug satisfaction radiating off her. She was certain she'd won. I sat down, turned on my monitor, and acted like nothing had happened. Inside, though, I was thinking 3 steps ahead, because Chloe had underestimated me. She thought I was the type who'd panic, deny, maybe even lash out. But the truth was, I'd been documenting things too. Not fake mistakes, not fabricated notes, but subtle details, real events, the kind of things people overlook until it's too late. The officers might not know it yet, but they were sitting on the edge of something much bigger than a few forged emails. That evening, as I packed up to leave, Chloe passed by my desk. She stopped, leaned against the partition, and whispered so no one else could hear. "Rough day, Jessica?" I looked up slowly. "Not as rough as yours will be." Her smile faltered for half a second, but she quickly recovered. "You'll see. People always find out who's really pulling the strings." "Yeah," I said softly. "They do." When I got home, I opened my laptop and reviewed my own records. I hadn't planned it this way, but over the past year, I'd built an archive. Not of mistakes, but of conversations, client feedback, performance reviews, and casual notes that painted a very different picture than the one Chloe was trying to sell. And tucked among those files was something I hadn't needed until now. Proof of Chloe's meddling. Because 3 weeks earlier, I'd caught her in my inbox. She'd accidentally sent a client draft under my name, riddled with errors. But the IT logs had captured her login session. I'd saved the screenshot. Quietly. Just in case. And now, just in case had arrived. I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair. Tomorrow, the officers would come back with more questions. They always did. And when they asked, I'd be ready. Because Chloe thought she was building a case against me. But what she didn't realize was that she'd been writing her own indictment the whole time. The next morning, I arrived at work earlier than usual. The office was still quiet, only the hum of computers and the faint smell of burnt coffee from yesterday's pot. I wanted time to breathe before the storm hit. But I didn't have long. At 9:12 sharp, the compliance officers returned. They stopped at my cubicle first. "Jessica, do you have a moment?" My coworkers looked up, curious. Some exchanged glances. Others kept their eyes down, pretending not to notice. I grabbed my notepad and followed the officers back to the same glass conference room as yesterday. This time, there was another person waiting inside. Mr. Harrison, our department manager. His jaw was tight, his hands folded on the table. He looked like he hadn't slept. The taller officer began, "Jessica, thank you for your cooperation yesterday. We've been reviewing the documentation. Some things don't quite add up. We'd like to clarify a few details." He slid a page across the table. The email screenshot Chloe had planted. "We checked the client records," the shorter officer said. "As you mentioned, the draft was never sent. The final version was clean. However, this printout clearly came from within the system." "Correct," I said, "but it wasn't taken by me." Mr. Harrison leaned forward. "Do you have proof of that?" I opened my notepad, flipped to the page where I'd written dates and times, and slid it back across the table. IT logs, 3 weeks ago. Someone accessed my account from a workstation that wasn't mine. I flagged it and took screenshots before reporting it to support. The officers studied the page. Mr. Harrison frowned. "Who?" I didn't answer right away. My pen tapped lightly against the table. "You'll see the username in the log," I said finally. It wasn't mine. I didn't have to say the name. They'd see it soon enough. Back at my desk, the atmosphere felt different. Conversations quieted when I walked past. People avoided eye contact. By noon, I understood why. "Jessica," my coworker Maria whispered when she caught me in the hallway. "I need to tell you something. Chloe's been talking." I stiffened. "Talking about what?" "She's saying you're under investigation for client mishandling, that you've been falsifying records to cover mistakes. She says compliance is close to proving it." I closed my eyes briefly. Chloe wasn't just relying on the planted folder. She was poisoning the well, creating doubt before the truth could surface. "Do people believe her?" I asked. Maria hesitated. "Some do. You know how she is. She makes it sound convincing." Of course she did. Chloe had inherited her father's charisma. The same sharp smile, the same ability to twist a story into something believable. And unlike me, she didn't care who she stepped on in the process. That afternoon, I noticed small changes. Emails from colleagues were shorter, clipped. The friendly banter in the break room quieted when I walked in. Even the receptionist, who always greeted me warmly, only offered a polite nod. Chloe's poison was spreading. But I reminded myself, perception isn't reality. The officers weren't fools. They had the logs. They had the handwriting samples. It was only a matter of time before the pieces came together. Still, that didn't make the waiting any easier. At 3:45, the compliance officers returned. This time, they didn't ask me to leave my desk. They asked Chloe. Her face went pale, but she smiled tightly and followed them into the conference room. The entire office pretended not to watch, but everyone did. Heads tilted, fingers paused above keyboards. Even Mr. Harrison stood outside his office, arms crossed, eyes following her. Through the blinds, I caught glimpses. Chloe gesturing with her hands, talking fast. One officer scribbling notes while the other kept his gaze locked on her. Her confidence slipping with every minute. 30 minutes passed. 40. At 50 minutes, the door opened. Chloe walked out, eyes red, jaw clenched. She didn't look at anyone as she marched back to her desk. The officers didn't say a word. They went straight to Mr. Harrison's office instead. For the rest of the day, Chloe barely moved. She typed furiously, but her hands shook on the keyboard. Every so often, she glanced my way, her expression somewhere between anger and panic. And I realized something important. She still thought she could win. She thought this was just a setback. That if she pushed harder, whispered louder, she could still convince everyone I was the villain. But the more she tried, the clearer the contrast became. Her noise versus my silence. Her rumors versus my record. Her chaos versus my calm. As I packed my bag that evening, Mr. Harrison stopped by my desk. He lowered his voice. "Jessica, keep doing your job. Don't engage. Understood?" I nodded, but inside I knew it wasn't enough to just survive this. Chloe had crossed a line. She hadn't just tried to take my job. She'd tried to take my name, my reputation, everything I'd built in 6 years. And if she thought I was going to let that slide, she didn't know me at all. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open. I organized the files I'd saved. AT logs, client testimonials, performance reviews, even casual emails where Chloe had overstepped. Piece by piece, the puzzle was forming. I wasn't just defending myself anymore. I was preparing to expose her. By 8:31, the calendar invite hit my inbox. Compliance review. Attendance required. Location. Conference room. B. Attendees. The 2 officers. Ms. Patel from HR. Mr. Harrison, my manager. Optional. Chloe Sanders. Optional, right. I printed nothing, brought only a notepad, and walked in exactly on time. The blinds were half closed. The table was too clean. Everyone had that stiff posture people get when they've decided not to make small talk. The taller officer started. "Jessica, thanks for coming. We've reviewed the documents found at your workstation and compared them to system records." His tone was neutral, but his jaw worked like he was chewing on a problem he didn't like. Ms. Patel nodded. "We'll walk through key points and then take questions." I folded my hands and waited. The shorter officer slid a page toward me. First, the email error that appeared in the folder. Server logs confirm your draft wasn't sent. The sent item in the client thread matches your corrected version. He tapped the margin. "This is fine." He placed a second page on top of the first. Second, access logs. At 5:46 p.m., 3 weeks ago, your account was opened from workstation 4C while you were badged out of the building at 5:28 p.m. Mr. Harrison looked at me. "You were off-site?" "Yes," I said. "Jim, the badge log will show I didn't return." Ms. Patel glanced at the taller officer. He slid over a printed table. Security confirmed the badge. We also pulled camera stills from 5:44 to 5:49 p.m. He turned the page around so I could see. The grainy frame showed my row of cubicles, a figure in a camel coat. Head down, hands in my drawer. Even in low resolution, the profile was unmistakable. Chloe's eyes flicked to the photo and away again. "That's not... You can't tell who that is." The shorter officer didn't argue. He placed a new sheet on the stack. Third, print server logs. The hard copies in the folder were produced on Konica Minolta 2E at 6:02 p.m. same day. Job owner, C. Sanders. Silence swallowed the room. Even the air vent sounded loud. Chloe let out a breathy laugh. We all print under shared queues. Anyone could. It wasn't a shared queue. The taller officer said quietly. It required network login. The job metadata includes the user hash. He looked at her, then at Ms. Patel. We verified it with IT. Mr. Harrison sat back. His face went a shade paler. Where was Mr. Sanders looped in on this? He asked, voice careful. He's Chloe's father and her skip level. Ms. Patel's expression didn't move. He was copied on the initial anonymous complaint. He has been recused as of this morning. That should have happened at the outset. She didn't look at Chloe when she said it. She didn't need to. I kept breathing. Steady in, steady out. I could feel the weight shifting in the room like a table finally settling on 4 legs. The shorter officer continued. We also compared the handwritten notes in the folder to samples from personnel files. They don't match yours. They do, however, match a training form initialed by Ms. Sanders during onboarding. The slant, the looped G's, the open A's. I was documenting concerns. Chloe cut in, voice sharp. Whistleblowing is encouraged here, right? Or do we punish people for caring about standards? Ms. Patel folded her hands. Whistleblowing is protected. Fabrication is not. Chloe's jaw twitched. I didn't fabricate anything. She's sloppy. Everyone knows it. Mr. Harrison looked at me, then back at Chloe. We don't know that. I opened my notepad and slid a single-color printout toward the officers. There's one more thing. My voice surprised me with how calm it sounded. 3 weeks ago, there was a client draft sent under my name with multiple errors. I caught it and resubmitted. IT traced the origination to CSANDERS on workstation 5B during my lunch hour. I reported it to support but asked them not to escalate unless it became a pattern. The taller officer scanned the printout, then pulled a second copy from his folder like he'd already been there. We have this. Thank you, Chloe gripped the edge of the table. You can't prove intent. People ask to help all the time. I was helping. Jessica leaves things half done. Intent is precisely what we're establishing, Ms. Patel said, still calm. We're also establishing process failures, including the lack of early recusal for your father. Chloe's head snapped toward her. He did nothing wrong. Ms. Patel didn't blink. That's why it's called a recusal, to protect all parties. The taller officer pushed the planted folder away like it was something that might spill. Jessica, do you have anything else you want to add? I thought about all of it. The quiet corrections, the clipped emails, the way conversations died when I walked into the break room. I thought about the coworkers who didn't look up, and Maria whispering, she makes it sound convincing. I want to keep doing my job, I said. I want my name to mean the same thing it meant last month. No one spoke for several seconds. Then Ms. Patel closed her notebook. Here's what happens next. Jessica, you'll return to your full duties. We'll remove any flags or holds on your accounts. Chloe, you are placed on administrative leave with pay effective immediately while we complete our review. You are not to access company systems or premises without HR approval. Chloe's mouth fell open. You're suspending me? Based on a printer log? Based on a fuzzy photo? We're suspending you based on a pattern, Ms. Patel said. The documents, the access logs, the timing, and the conflict of interest concerns. We need to do this properly. Chloe turned to Mr. Harrison like he might pull a lever and change the floor under my chair. Say something. He looked tired, older. Compliance is running this. I'm staying out of it, like I should have from the start. The shorter officer gathered the papers. He paused, then looked up at me. We'll likely ask more questions, but the core issues are clear. As we stood, the taller officer added almost gently, for what it's worth, we don't like being used. When we realized the print jobs were tied to a complainant's account, well, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Their faces went pale when they discovered what they were carrying was someone else's weapon. I stepped into the hallway and let the hum of the office swallow me. Keyboards, phones, the far-off clatter of the mail cart. Maria was near the copier. Our eyes met. She didn't say anything. She just nodded once, slow, like we were finally standing on the same piece of ground again. At my desk, my monitor woke to the client dashboard. No red banners, no holds. The ordinary grid of names and renewal dates looked almost beautiful. A minute later, security appeared at Chloe's cubicle with Ms. Patel. They spoke quietly. Chloe handed over her badge and laptop, movements jerky, like she couldn't quite believe the physics of what was happening. She didn't look at me. She walked out without drama, just a tight line where her mouth should be. The office didn't cheer. No one clapped. That isn't how real life works. People stared at their screens and typed and pretended not to notice what they were noticing. I took a breath and opened the next client file. This wasn't over. Administrative leave wasn't a verdict. Policies take time. Processes have to be followed. Endings aren't clean lines on a calendar invite. But for the first time in weeks, I felt the table steady under my hands. And then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Internal extension. Jessica? The voice was firm, unfamiliar. This is Elaine Mercer, Director of Compliance. I'd like to meet with you privately this afternoon. There's something you should see. It concerns Mr. Sanders. I stared at the receiver, the cursor blinking on my screen. Of course there was more. Send the invite, I said. I'll be there. At 3 p.m. sharp, I walked into the 12th floor conference room. The skyline stretched behind the glass like a backdrop, the city buzzing far below. Inside sat Elaine Mercer, the Director of Compliance. I'd only seen her twice before, both times in all-hands meetings. She carried herself like someone who didn't need to raise her voice to be heard. Jessica, she said, gesturing to a chair. Thank you for coming on short notice. Her tone was calm, but the folder in front of her was thick. Too thick. The door shut behind me with a soft click. Elaine flipped the folder open. We've concluded the initial review of the documents planted in your desk. You should know, Chloe's actions weren't isolated. They were supported directly or indirectly by her father. I blinked. Mr. Sanders? Yes. Elaine slid a paper across the table. It was an email thread, heavily redacted but clear enough. The anonymous complaint had originated from his account. He had blind copied Chloe. He had coached her on phrasing, even suggested attaching the evidence she had compiled. I felt my stomach twist. So the anonymous report wasn't anonymous at all. Elaine nodded. Exactly. Normally, we encourage employees to raise concerns, but anonymity doesn't mean immunity. Using the process to settle personal scores, that's an abuse of the system. I stared at the page. 6 years I'd worked here. 6 years of clean reviews, loyal clients, late nights making sure nothing slipped through. And my boss had decided his daughter's ambition mattered more than my career. Elaine continued. Here's what happens next. Chloe remains on administrative leave while HR completes a formal review. Her father has been placed on interim suspension pending the outcome. Compliance will recommend escalation to the board. I exhaled slowly, barely believing what I was hearing. She leaned forward. Jessica, your record is clear, more than clear. Client satisfaction scores, system logs, peer feedback. Everything points to consistent professional performance. You are not under investigation. Do you understand? For the first time in days, my chest loosened. Yes, I said quietly. Good. Now I need to ask you something. She closed the folder and placed both hands on it. What do you want moving forward? The question caught me off guard. What did I want? My first instinct was simple. To keep my job. To go back to my desk, to my routine, to the safety of normal. But normal was gone. Chloe had made sure of that. I want my work to speak for itself, I said finally. And I don't want to look over my shoulder wondering who's waiting to sabotage me next. Elaine studied me for a moment. Then she nodded. Fair. Back at my desk, the office felt different. People weren't avoiding me anymore. Maria stopped by with a smile that looked more like an apology. Daniel from finance dropped off a file and lingered, asking how I was holding up. The tide had shifted. Chloe's cubicle was empty, her chair pushed in neatly. Her father's office, the corner one with the view, sat dark. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to breathe. 2 weeks later, the official announcement went out. Effective immediately, Mr. Sanders has stepped down as department head. Chloe Sanders is no longer employed with the company. The email was short, clinical. But the shockwave rippled through every floor. People whispered in break rooms, speculating about what had really happened. I didn't add to the rumors. I didn't need to. Because the truth was already in the files, in the logs, in the handwriting that wasn't mine. That Friday, Mr. Harrison called me into his office. He looked tired, older than I remembered, but his voice was steady. Jessica, I owe you an apology, he said. I should have protected you sooner. I should have questioned what was happening instead of letting it play out. I let politics cloud my judgment. I didn't say anything. Sometimes silence is the only honest answer. He cleared his throat. The board approved my recommendation. Effective Monday, you'll be promoted to senior account manager, full control of the client portfolio. I blinked. You're serious? He nodded. You earned it long ago. This company needs people who build trust, not tear it down. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table, the promotion letter in front of me. The city lights shimmered outside my window. I thought about everything. Chloe's whispers, her smug smile, the way she'd leaned against my cubicle with that false confidence. I thought about her father, about the way he'd chosen blood over fairness. And I thought about the compliance officers' faces when the truth surfaced. They hadn't just discovered planted evidence. They'd discovered what envy looks like when it curdles into sabotage. Here's the part no one tells you. Revenge in real life doesn't look like fireworks. It doesn't look like public humiliation or dramatic speeches. It looks like a folder closed quietly on a conference room table. It looks like an empty cubicle on Monday morning. It looks like people realizing, slowly, who you really were all along. I still walk past Chloe's old desk every day. It stays empty, waiting for a new hire. But for me, it's a reminder that no matter how carefully someone plots against you, the truth leaves a trail.